You have two very big egos in Modi and Trump.
On the ego question, a number of Indians would say back to that, in one case it's ego, in the other case it's pride. It was galling because irrespective of what your politics are here in India, whether you're pro-BJP or anti-BJP, as an Indian, you're looking at the head of another country, making an announcement that pertains to a war that your country's been at with another country. And I think a lot of people saw that as an issue of sovereignty.
He's already written the script. He wants to be the great peacemaker in the world. That's part of the problem that he's had with India.
What happened to Trump's favorite Field Marshal, Asim Munir?
Post May 10th, Pakistan did not rebuke President Trump for his statement. Not only did they not rebuke President Trump for his statement, they nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. They announced a bunch of deals on critical minerals, cryptocurrency, oil. So they've really, played to his ego.
India has benefited from growing tensions between the United States and China. The relationship with India seems a little bit less important if things are not getting worse with China.
Literally every morning here in India, we get up with just one question. Which country might Donald Trump be gunning for next? Never before has the world seemed to be as unpredictable, as volatile as it does today. Literally every morning here in India, we get up with just one question. Which country might Donald Trump be gunning for next? Will it be Iran? Will it be Venezuela? More action in Venezuela? Will it be Cuba? Will it be Greenland? We simply do not know. And in the midst of all of this is the unrelenting standoff between India and the United States. If Donald Trump's additional 25% tariffs on any country that trades with Iran were to be applied, then India today possibly faces a whopping 75% tariff. Relations between India and the United States have been nosediving since Trump asked for credit during Operation Sindoor for what he claims was his role in ending the war. It's a claim that India has always denied, saying that hostilities came to a halt only when the Director General of Military Operations in Pakistan made the phone call to the Indian DGMO asking for a ceasefire. At the moment, the big question is a strategic, deep, important relationship. The hit to it has political, geopolitical, and economic costs. And to talk about what might happen next, not just between India and the US, but on the global stage, I want to introduce our Foreign Policy Roundtable today with three very interesting and accomplished guests from the United States of America visiting here in India. I want to first welcome Chris Chivvis, who's the Senior Fellow and Director of the American Statecraft Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Welcome to India, Chris.
Thanks very much, Barkha.
And I want to also welcome Afreen Akhter. She has been a former United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia and is also with Carnegie. And finally, last but never the least, I want to welcome Stephen Wertheim, a leading expert on the U.S. foreign policy strategy, also with Carnegie. Welcome, everybody. Chris, let me start with you.
Yeah.
As we speak, we are expecting a strike, possibly, by the United States on Iran. As we speak, we think that Trump may go in either by coercion or military intervention in Greenland. In such an unpredictable time, is there any focus on repairing India and the United States?
You know, I wish that there were, Barkha, but I don't think so. It just doesn't seem to be a priority for this administration right now. As you say, I mean, they are interested in projecting the maximum amount of American power all over the world, whether it's demonstrating their ability to remove Maduro from Venezuela, threatening the European Union with the territorial annexation of Greenland, something that's, completely unheard of in, Washington circles, or now, implying that they're going to take some kind of military action against Iran, which of course they've already done in 2025. You pointed to unpredictability. This is one of the things that I think actually President Trump favors. He wants to be seen as unpredictable so that people will be constantly guessing what his next move is. But you're right. Unfortunately, the U.S.-India relationship doesn't seem to be very high on his priority list.
In an interview to me, Fareed Zakaria said that Trump was like a television producer. He was only interested when the story began, and he lost interest soon after, and he began looking for the next story. So even his military interventions, he didn't actually see them through. So Venezuela, for example,
Right.
if the aim was regime change, that hasn't quite happened.
Exactly right. I think that, his foreign policy is driven by the news cycle and by the amount of time that he can ensure that he drives that news cycle. I mean, just consider that in the United States domestically, we have some very serious issues. We had the shooting of a woman in Minneapolis by an agent of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Service in the United States. We had the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, taking a very strong position against President Trump. And meanwhile, Trump is just putting one after another issue on the table in order to drive that news cycle in the direction that he wants it to go.
So, Afreen, to that extent, do you agree with Chris that India is not a priority? When Sergio Gore's name was announced as envoy to India, and we should also remember that he's also envoy for the larger region, there were two perspectives on it. And I ask you this particularly as you have actually served in American administration. One was Sergio Gore has Trump's ear. This recognizes the importance of India. The other was he's now being envoy for the entire region, which is a sort of bringing back a hyphenation between India and Pakistan that India has always been concerned about. Do you think that Chris is right, that actually India is not a priority? And if India is not a priority, why would India at this moment be interested in a rapprochement as a self-respecting independent country?
I'm sorry to say I do agree that India is not a priority. And when it comes to South Asia, I don't think the administration is thinking about this region strategically at all. It's looking at it from the perspective of highly personalized politics, optics of power, and then whatever deals it can extract from the region. So I actually think looking at how Pakistan has approached Trump is really interesting and instructive. So, post May 10th, Pakistan did not rebuke President Trump for his statement. Not only did they not rebuke President Trump for his statement, they nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. They announced a bunch of deals on critical minerals, cryptocurrency, oil. So they've really, played to his ego, right? In a way that is appealing and has, for the most part, although today we saw, the visa restrictions.
It includes Pakistan.
It does.
So I was thinking what happened to Trump's favorite Field Marshal, Asim Munir.
Right. So that also gets to, you've talked extensively about unpredictability. That is a feature of this administration. That is something he really likes because we've seen across the board in any country that has little to no leverage on the United States. Unpredictability essentially means that leaders of countries come to President Trump basically begging for relief on tariffs or immigration, all of these coercive tools of power that he's used across the board. So backing up to India, I don't think the administration is thinking about it strategically. It's very unclear what they want Sergio Gore to do in this role of special envoy for South and Central Asia. I would say that nobody at the State Department really knows, and I'm doubtful that he knows himself what exactly his role is supposed to be. And fundamentally, whatever Sergio Gore says or does, we've seen time and again that it really just comes down to the president, what his instincts are, what he feels in the moment, whether he feels respected, whether he feels disrespected. And that ultimately is what's going to drive the relationship.
Somebody compared it to a royal court and a monarch.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the problem with India in a lot of ways, because you have two very big egos in Modi and Trump. And those egos aligned in the first Trump administration. You had Howdy Modi, you had Trump come with an entourage of 60 people to India, and there was this big bromance. And just as easily, that's fallen apart because you have two big personalities.
On the ego question, just briefly before I come to Stephen, I've heard this from a lot of Americans that there are two big egos involved. And a number of Indians would say back to that, in one case, it's ego. In the other case, it's pride. And let me just say why we perceive it like that. When the military conflict was on between India and Pakistan, and the halt in hostilities was to be announced, before the Indian Foreign Secretary, our top diplomat, could come out and make this announcement, Trump posted it on Truth Social, right? And it was galling because irrespective of what your politics are here in India, whether you're pro-BJP or anti-BJP. As an Indian, you're looking at the head of another country, making an announcement that pertains to a war that your country's been at with another country. And I think a lot of people saw that as an issue of sovereignty.
Mm.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think, I represented the Biden administration, and there was certainly an appreciation for that complexity and nuance. Yep. But in this administration, there's no appreciation for complexity and nuance. So I am not surprised that they don't care about sovereignty, that he's not even really thinking about it. What he's thinking about is headlines. What is a headline that I can announce? I want to be the peacemaker. I want to be the deal maker. I want to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And that is just one more notch under his belt. So he's just not thinking in that way.
Stephen, you've been writing and arguing for a while now that anybody who thought that Trump is isolationist had got it wrong. And did everybody basically misread Trump? Because when Trump took charge for the second time, there was this assumption that MAGA, Make America Great Again, was going to be all about domestic America. And Trump couldn't give a toss about the rest of the world. It seems now that Trump's domestic energy is driven entirely from flexing American muscle on the global stage. So there's a kind of complete link between the greatness, quote unquote, of America and Trump reverting America to that role of sort of a global cop.
Yeah, I was really surprised to hear people say that Trump was an isolationist once again. I thought that in his first term, he had proven not to be an isolationist. But to be fair, in the 2024 presidential campaign, Trump did run on peace. He ran on wanting to end the war in Ukraine as soon as possible, same with the war in Gaza. And then almost the moment he got elected, he started going on about taking back the Panama Canal, taking over Greenland. And so what we've seen is a very aggressive, very assertive approach to the use of American power pretty much everywhere. We've heard a lot of people in our discussions here and also in Europe and in the United States talking about Trump potentially, moving towards a sphere of influence world where the United States guards the Western Hemisphere, allows China to do whatever it wants in Asia, and the same with Russia in Europe. But
so a kind of tripolar world, a G3, if you will.
G3, perhaps. Trump made that post about a G2 with China, but I wouldn't overread that. I think so far what we've seen is Trump actually just trying to assert American power, sometimes through new tools like tariffs, pretty much everywhere. So I read him at this point as trying to promote American primacy more aggressively than we've seen.
So any politician needs public support. And my question to you, and I understand that America is so politically polarized that this is an impossible question. I would say India is very divided on domestic issues, but on foreign policy generally rallies together. My question to you is, how's this all going down with the American people? The flexing of American muscle.
So it hasn't been a disaster for Trump, mainly because he has avoided, when he's used force, getting caught up in a quagmire. He has managed, whether it's by luck or calculation, time and time again to sort of extricate himself. We'll see, though. I'm concerned that he will not continue to have that kind of luck going forward. But on the other hand, there were off-cycle elections in November in the United States. The Republicans performed very badly. That bodes poorly for their performance in the upcoming midterm elections later this year. And a lot of people thought voters, they may agree or disagree with what Trump is doing in foreign policy, but they think he's too focused on affairs abroad, and he should focus on the very serious domestic problems that we have in the United States, including an economy that most people think is not going very well. And Trump seems to be doubling down on his reign.
Is it a headline deflection? It's also easy to sort of to get all the focus, the headline management on the fires you're fighting outside than maybe to talk about the issues at home. Afreen, do you want to come in on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think he's very good at the president is very good at the politics of attention. I mean, he's very focused on shifting attention from conflict to conflict to conflict. I mean, this was a feature of his first administration and both of his campaigns. Nobody can get too angry or focused on any one particular issue because there's another issue that's dominating the headlines. And that is really important for accountability within our system. And right now in Washington, there is zero balance of power. But even when there is more of a balance of power, say after the midterms when the Democrats are expected to win back the House of Representatives, the sheer breadth and range of crises makes it really hard to focus on any one and hold the president accountable. And politically, it's actually quite a smart strategy, and it's worked for him time and again.
Yep. Chris, I want to talk a little bit about China.
Okay.
Because it's very relevant, I think, to how India crafts next moves. And I've heard two opinions from actually American commentators. So there are those on the left, like Jeffrey Sachs, who are so critical of Trump and frankly, a lot of critical also of American foreign policy over the decades, that Sachs would argue that it's not in India's interest to keep looking at America as a safe zone. In an interview with me, he told me that India should basically reconcile with China, walk out of the Quad, because the Quad is distinctly an anti-China. I know I can see you disagreeing, just putting the argument out there, that the Quad is distinctly an anti-China formation at its core. And the Americans aren't treating India sort of in the way that India needs and deserves to be treated. And therefore, what are you still hanging on to the Quad for? So let's for a moment talk about what's happening. If Trump is trying to compete with, but also cut a deal with China, which seems to be the case, what is the meaning of the Quad anymore? Does it have any meaning, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think India has benefited from growing tensions between the United States and China that we've seen really over the course of the last 10 years. I mean, this is a period in which both the first Trump administration and the Biden administration really focused on strategic competition, military competition with China, and increasingly looked to India as a counterweight to Chinese power in the Indo-Pacific. I think that the tension between the U.S. and China has sort of reached a high point, or at least a plateau. And as a consequence, that has somewhat negative consequences for U.S.-India relations, because the relationship with India seems a little bit less important if things are not getting worse with China. That said, the reality is that the United States and China are in a strategic competition, whether you like it or not. That's a structural fact. China's economy, measured in purchasing power parity, is now larger than the American economy. Its military poses serious problems for the U.S. military in East Asia. So this is something that's not going away, even if Trump tries to bring the temperature down, which I think is a good thing, actually. But in the longer term, it's true, India will remain important, but we got to get over these problems that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Yeah. I want to add Pakistan into this mix, because in the military conflict, Afreen, between India and Pakistan, the Indian army went on record to say we weren't fighting one country, we were actually fighting two. And the reference was to China's role behind the scenes, not just in the supplying of the weapons that were used, but in monitoring real time and so on. And in India, Pakistan is basically seen almost like a vassal state, an arm of China. But at the same time, we are observing, and you alluded to this sort of curious cozying up between Washington and Islamabad, which for many Indians is a kind of horrible deja vu. What's going on? Is Trump doing this because he thinks he needs Pakistan for Iran, Afghanistan? Is he doing this simply because the Pakistanis flattered him? We have no idea. And as you mentioned, the freezing of, the visas, the 75 countries, it includes Pakistan. So it's very hard to say what's going on. But when you add Pakistan to this China mix, for India's strategic calculations, there's something there that doesn't sit right. So how do you look at the relationship today between Trump and Pakistan?
I think it comes down to ego and deal making. Like I said earlier, Pakistan has genuinely been better at managing Trump's ego.
I mean, are we really saying that all this is about one man's bruised ego? And if he were flattered, that India and the US could spring right back? I mean, just saying it out loud just sounds absurd.
Genuinely, it is absurd, but
yeah,
that's the
it is what it is.
Yeah. I genuinely think that's what it is. And then again, they know that the Trump administration cares about critical minerals, it cares about rare earths, it cares about fossil fuels. So announcements on those three things were incredibly compelling to the Trump administration. I think they just have managed him, frankly, better than the Indians, because the Indians were approaching this from a lens of a partnership. Pakistan under the Biden administration was, treated as subordinate, quite frankly, in the region. I think the Biden administration viewed India as the more important and more critical partner and decreased defense ties, all kinds of cooperation with Pakistan.
But if you remember, Trump earlier on was actually going to go the same route and actually take it further with Pakistan.
Yeah.
And it's very puzzling to wonder what changed. I mean, can it be only flattery and some say business relations between Trump's family and, on this cryptocurrency thing? I don't know if you follow that.
That's what he cares about. So
Flattery
and deal making. He's a very transactional
Specifically, these business relations.
Yeah.
It's not just deals. It's deals for the United States, but it's also personal deals for his family. We have to be honest about this. We see it across a range of different issues. If you can make an offer to the White House that benefits the personal interests of the president's family, you have a higher chance of getting what you want out of the United States. That's just where we are right now in American foreign policy.
So what does this do to even understanding what is Washington's security doctrine? Because it isn't about a doctrine anymore. It doesn't matter what the Pentagon publishes. It doesn't matter whether you call it Indo-Pacific or you call it Asia-Pacific. It doesn't matter whether it's about the Western Hemisphere or it's about the entire world. The suggestion here from both Afreen and Chris is that it's not actually being driven by ideology, that it could actually turn on a dime, that if Trump's in a different mood, if you manage to assuage him, if you manage to please him, if you manage to flatter him, he would change policy.
It is depressing. I mean, that's how it is.
It's also so absurd that it's almost hilarious, but yeah.
Yeah. Maybe with the passage of time, this will become hilarious. Not so much right now.
Yeah. Right now, it has very real consequences, actually.
Yeah. What I would say, though, is that Donald Trump will not last forever as president of the United States. He is constitutionally required to leave the office in 3 years' time. And all the things that we know about the United States that we saw over the last 4 or 5 years, they're still there. Mm-hmm. And that includes the U.S. bureaucracy, which has been Trumpified to a degree, but those interests are still there. The people are still there. So obviously, this is going to be a very difficult relationship with India and many other countries for the rest of President Trump's tenure in office. But
what do you see happening to the trade deal? I mean, we're currently theoretically looking, actually officially 50%. And if you add the tariffs that he's announced on trading partners with Iran, we're looking at 75% tariffs for India, though the Iran bit is unclear. Nobody's communicated it properly. What do you see happening to the trade deal?
Well, it doesn't make sense in the first place to have that level of tariff. Mm-hmm. So you would think that sometime in the next year, one side or another will find a way to back down. That said, you would have said that a year ago. Why would we be in this position to begin with?
Well, I think Trump thought that he could broker a Russia-Ukraine deal. And Indians may have thought that the issue of Russian oil, which he completely applied selectively because he didn't penalize China, which is a bigger purchaser of Russian oil than India in the same way. But maybe that would have been the cue for this, at least 25% of these tariffs to go away. Do any of you, I'll start with you, see any window for this trade deal actually being closed in the near future?
I think it's possible. I think there will be pressure here on Modi to do what's necessary to make a deal. By the way, even if India is not a priority for Trump, that could be a good thing. Maybe he's got his hands full elsewhere and he just says, all right, I'm done with this spat. Let's make a deal. So, you can't rule anything out or in with this president of the United States. And the arbitrariness of it, though, I think is, part of the problem.
It's true. And there are other actors in the U.S. foreign policy system, as Stephen is saying, beyond the president himself. I mean, the president lives very large, especially when it's someone like Donald Trump. But we have, corporate interests in India, as Stephen mentioned. There's an expert community, there's bureaucracy, there's civil society. And I think, the main thrust of all of those groups is to try to get things back, at least to where they were, a year ago. So absolutely, if President Trump decides, I'm just going to let this happen, benign neglect, in other words, allow things to improve and get a trade deal, those forces would all be pushing in favor of it.
What is the end game here? When Trump is doing this sort of expansionist, almost sort of this neo-imperialism driven policy around the world, what do you think is there an end goal?
For Trump, I think one of the goals is his legacy. He is looking to his legacy. He's not going to be running again, presumably, for president. So he's already written the script. He wants to be the great peacemaker in the world. That's part of the problem that he's had with India.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, I think that's one issue. But his view of how you reach peace is peace through strength, which means throwing America's weight around quite a bit, being unpredictable, keeping others off balance.
Here's a question. Stephen just said, Trump isn't going to be there forever. Do you believe that a post-Trump America would be altered in a fundamental way, both at home and abroad? Or do you believe it's about picking up the pieces where Trump left them? Or is that too hard a question to know the answer to right now?
Well, I can answer abroad. I think it has done incredible damage to, the continuity of our bilateral relationships. So when I was a deputy assistant secretary, after the first Trump administration, before the second, this was a constant issue I faced with our partners. How can we trust what you say? How will this last past your administration? And at the time, I argued that the Indo-Pacific was actually a bipartisan priority. The first Trump administration wrote an Indo-Pacific strategy. There was a lot of that was continued under the Biden administration. But it seems to have all been blown up in this administration. So, I think our foreign partners very rightly have a lot of concerns about the continuity and predictability of U.S. foreign policy. And it's not something that we really can commit to over the long term.
It's absolutely right. The world, like Afreen says, is going to be different. It already is different after 1 year of Donald Trump's unpredictability, unwillingness to accept any constraints on American power. This is changing the character of the world order. I don't think that the United States, in terms of whoever comes next after Donald Trump, and there will be someone else, it's important to bear that in mind, will be able to return to the kind of policies that the United States pursued for 30 years after the end of the Cold War. But that doesn't mean that Donald Trump is the only other option. I think whether you have a Republican or especially if a Democrat comes to power, you're going to have some kind of a new, more innovative foreign policy, hopefully one that takes a constructive view of world order and manages to avoid the sort of the challenges and the turmoil that Trump has created. Yeah.
In the end, I just want to talk about something that we can't fully play it out right now, Iran. And I want to start with you. What is your perspective? It's if you speak with Iranians who live outside of Iran, because it's very difficult right now to speak with Iranians who are inside of Iran, they say that whether you like or you don't like Trump, you can't bring that into what the American response should be. And that now that the American president has said help is on its way to the protesters, that help has to come. Now, as Chris mentioned, it's not as if we haven't seen, strikes from America before. Is this time going to be different?
We'll see. Trump may have signaled recently that he may not strike.
Because the public execution has been stopped.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's always, whether it's Trump in the Oval Office or not, it's always a very fraught thing for the United States to try to intervene with military force in another country to determine the domestic trajectory of that country. It can very easily backfire. It certainly gives the regime the card that it wants to.
And Iran is not Venezuela.
That's right. And it does matter, by the way, who is in the Oval Office. Other presidents probably wouldn't have thought in the case of Venezuela, I can depose Maduro, but leave the entire rest of the regime there and coerce that regime to try to give oil to the United States wouldn't have even crossed the minds of Trump's predecessors.
Yeah.
So, in terms of what Trump could do in Iran, it could very well be a kind of spectacular demonstration of power that doesn't achieve much of anything for the people of Iran and maybe isn't even designed to do that.
And that would be I don't know, there's no way to guess what Trump would do, but to pick up on that idea of a symbolic strike. So you say you've done something, but you don't actually see it through, which actually offers nothing to the people who are being killed on the streets. Because, as if you don't actually take the regime out, then what is the purpose of the strikes? But if the strikes are aimed at either eliminating or deposing or ousting the regime, then it can't just be done with one set of airstrikes.
Right. I mean, I think what we've seen throughout the second Trump administration is his emphasis on the optics of power. He wants to be able to strike X, Y, or Z country, but not, as Stephen said, pull the United States into any sort of long-term conflict that would actually be politically costly for him.
Yeah.
So he'll strike Iran, maybe once he'll strike Venezuela, and he'll do it because it makes him look strong. And that is really something that he cares about.
Do you agree, Chris?
I agree 100%. I mean, I think the optics of power is exactly the right way to put it. I mean, with regard to Venezuela, I mean, the possibility of, special operations kind of plan that takes out Iranian leaders seems far-fetched to me. You never know. I don't think we'd want it. That would be very, very, very risky. And I don't think Trump would want to take those risks. So if he does something, I think it's going to be long-range strikes, standoff fires fired from, the ocean or maybe from.
But that may or may not make any difference.
Not going to make a difference. I mean, maybe the regime will fall, but then we'll probably have chaos. If strong forces within Iran, like the IRGC, survive those strikes, then they'll probably take over. That's the most likely scenario. Things will not be better for the Iranian people. And U.S.-Iran relations are not going to improve a whole lot. So it's hard to see how this goes well in any near-term scenario.
So in all this volatility, what would you say to the Indians watching this right now, many of whom have children, parents, who live or study or work in the United States? There's a real sense of a kind of growing racism, even against very, very well integrated members of not just the Indian American community, but all, and I'm talking about legal migration here, like they have not been spared the blowback. Just last thoughts to people watching this. This too shall pass. Is that a fair?
Look, the United States is a huge country, right? It's not as big as India, but it's a very diverse country. And I think, one of the unfortunate things about our information environment today is that, a couple of, bad, people with malign views can come to represent or appear to represent the views of a whole country. That's just not the case. The United States is still the United States. We certainly have had some ugliness recently, but, there is a future to U.S.-India relations. People are going to have to be patient, but I think that, for the structural reasons, both the United States and India have an interest in cooperating, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Well, we hope you guys have a great trip here. Thank you so much to Stephen, Afreen, and Chris. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.